This is Talk Business and Politics with Roby Brock.
Well, he was sworn into office as the state's 46th governor a little over a year ago. Governor Asa Hutchinson sat down with me in studio earlier in the week before an out-of-town business trip to talk about his first year in office, his new highway funding plan, and his latest effort on the jobs front.
Your first year in office, it's hard to believe, a year. Time flies when you're having fun, I suppose. I have seen people give you everywhere from grades of a good solid A to an incomplete because of some of the task force work that still remains to be done. How would you grade yourself, first year in office?
Well, you grade yourself by whether you did what you said you were going to do, and we've done that. So I'd give a very high grade. The public actually assigns the letter grades. But you know, whenever we've did our tax cut last year, whenever we passed our computer coding, which has become a national success, whenever we've reformed our workforce education, addressed the highway needs, we're doing what we said we were going to do, and that's what the public expects.
Where do you feel like you've had your biggest shortfall? Where do you see room for improvement that you feel like I could do a better job doing this now that I've got a year under my belt?
Always want to work more closely with the legislature. This is a team effort. It's not a one-man show. And so working closer with them is one of my objectives. Communication is always a challenge in this environment as to why we're doing it, how and what the results are going to be. But the key thing is finishing some of the things that are things that we didn't plan on that have popped up. You know, the prisons is something that's ongoing, our reentry programs. These are things that will be ongoing this year that we've got to have more success in. Our foster care, we've got more challenges there. DHS and efficiencies in government. So a lot to continue doing. But I ran on the promise that I was going to focus on economic development. That continues to be my mission. And so while we have all of these other challenges and things we want to address, if we can create more jobs, greater economic growth, better pay, then that's a success that I want to be able to measure, and we're continuing to concentrate on that.
Yeah, you said you want to be the jobs governor. This week, though, you're the roads governor, although I know my friend Craig Douglas at the Good Roads Foundation says roads equal jobs. So let's talk about your 10-year, $750 million plan to shore up some short-term highway financing here. You're kind of taking a precedent of moving some general revenue out of that pot and into specifically earmarked for highways. Are you expecting some pushback from that, and why did you decide to kind of make that philosophical move?
Well, one, I think it was important to say we're on the same team, and highway development is important to higher education. It's important to the future for our young people and job creation, and so you know, general revenue should be a part of the mix and the debate. I think it does build a better relationship between the legislature and the highway department. I mentioned that now that we're going to have some general revenue funds going to highways, we do need to have greater communication, some internal reform within the highway department so that there's greater clarity on what's being done and why it's being done. I think the legislature can appropriately ask questions as to the efficiency that's being achieved. We can ask, now that we're giving you $40 million of our discretionary surplus, how are you going to spend that? That's an appropriate question, and I think the Highway Department has expressed a willingness to come to the table and say, we're going to answer those questions.
The Highway Department will tell you they're an open book right now. FOI or information, come and get it. But it's not easy to kind of decipher how that goes. What do you want to see done more clearly, with more clarity that you're speaking of?
It's probably primarily communication. Because of their constitutional independence, people don't understand and hasn't worked on understanding exactly what happens over there, and probably the Highway Department has not communicated as clearly as it should be. This gives them an avenue to communicate more clearly. So I think we're going to improve that relationship there, and let's see what they bring to the table in terms of some internal reforms that I think will help assure the public that not only are they managing it well, but they're going to be listening and responsive to and be a part of the team.
You have said that you have some ideas for saving money since some of that general revenue money will be disappearing. Give me some specifics of exactly what you see in terms of savings in state government.
Well, first of all, we have a lot of things under the works, from my hiring freeze to Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin's review of DHS to the Policy Foundation doing a more comprehensive review and making recommendations on efficiency. So we have a lot that's going on right now. But specifically, I've asked our Mike Preston in economic development, give us a report as to, what economic incentives are really working. Is there anything that we can do better, achieve more efficiencies there? So that's an avenue I've asked him to take a look at. But I have no doubt.
You may cut some funding to AEDC.
I'll leave it the way I just said it, that I've asked him to review it. Now, I don't want to cut, it's not about cutting funding, it's about using our tools that are most effective in job creation. We want to be able to compete, and we're using our incentive packages and our tax credits very effectively, but we've got a number of them. I think it's always appropriate to take a look at that. But it's beyond that. What I've said is that there's no doubt we can save some money to offset the loss of general revenue that's going to highways so that we're not adversely impacting the care of our children, education, and other needs of this state. That's my commitment. And so this has received broad support because they have a confidence that we're not going to diminish our support for higher education and the other elements of our budget.
You have said too that this budget that you're going to be proposing that has the shift for money for highways is dependent upon Medicaid expansion passing. Give me a little bit more understanding of how important it is for you guys to continue the private option, Arkansas Works, whatever you want to call it, Medicaid expansion in this context.
Well, part of the highway plan to meet our immediate need of $46 million for this year to match the federal money that's available to us. So there's really $250 million on the table here. But we're matching that with $40 million of our budget surplus. If we do not have the Arkansas Works Initiative, if we do not have the federal expansion money, then we have to plug about $100 million at least into the budget. And so the $40 million that I would be putting on highways would have to go elsewhere. And so it just is not doable to utilize that surplus for highways if we have to use it to plug other holes in our budget.
That sounds like a pretty compelling argument you'll be making with legislators in the fiscal session once you do roll out whatever Medicaid expansion your program looks like after talking to the feds. What do you think those legislators who are resistant to the Medicaid expansion, is that going to balance it out? Have you got any assurances on that?
Well, I don't know. I think it's my responsibility as governor to make sure we understand the consequences of our actions. And so that's why I said we need two budgets. I'm very optimistic that the legislators and the public will support greater work incentives and encouragement to work, greater personal responsibility in our Medicaid population. But if they don't accept those reforms that I've offered, then they need to understand we've got to redo the budget, and there's some serious consequences to that.
If Medicaid expansion doesn't get through in the fiscal session, is this highway plan off the table? Do you have to rework it as well?
Well, it have to be reworked. I mean, I'm just not sure. We wouldn't be able to meet the short-term financing needs, and certainly would not be able to do it without a tax increase. And that's something we haven't talked about. This plan that I have does not include raising gasoline taxes, diesel taxes, or any other type of tax. This is a tax-neutral proposal. And so if we cannot do it within this plan, then you have to look at alternatives, and one of them is raising taxes.
All right. I'm going to leave it at that in terms of your highway plan there.
That's Governor Asa Hutchinson, and you can catch that full interview on our website at talkbusiness.net. Now, when we come back, a look at some top news, and then we'll dissect the governor's highway plan in deeper detail from representatives of two groups with very different perspectives. We're back after this.